Sounds like 5 minutes. No, okay. Hello and welcome to our VAD, our men's VAD, and we're continuing the story of the Tower of Bavel. If you remember where we got to last week, do you remember where we got to last week? Do you didn't get a chance to look at this yet? Ooh, right. Okay, it's actually quite a useful thing to do because everybody will have had a week in between and will have forgotten all sorts of things. So I tell you what, the Tower of Bavel is an extraordinarily difficult story, to put it mildly. And last week we started off by quoting the Ramban, who questions the Rasheed and says, why do we start the Torah from Bereshit? And he says, what Rasheed is really saying is, there is no way on earth that you're going to understand really what's going on. It was a totally different world. People were totally different creatures. We learned to remember Adam was a creature of light. So to understand what the world was like then, and he says, if you think you're going to understand the Torah, the Dor HaFloga, the story of the Torah Bavel, or Noah, and it's all beyond us. Yet, even though it's one of the most difficult and abstract and certainly mystical stories in the whole of the Torah, it's only in the Torah it teaches us something in our mundane 2020, nearly 2021 lives. It has to relate to us now. And we said that it does. And that's where one of the things we quoted last week. So this is in the end of Parshas Noach. For those who are watching this at home and want to quickly grab a chumash, it's the end of Parshas Noach and it's chapter Yud Aleph. And I have my friend here, Chaim, who's joined me in the flesh, and so he's quite busy looking it up. There, so it's Yud Aleph, and it's also Yud Aleph, and it goes from there. So they want to, and it sounds so absolutely bizarre. They want to build a city, and they want to build with a tower, and they move to the west from the east, and they're going to fight with God, and that sounds total insanity, utter insanity. The Alshich goes very, very, and of course Alshich was a big Kabbalist, but here he's openly Kabbalistic in his delving into this, and he started with 8 Kabbalistic principles. I'll quickly tell you what those are, for those who've forgotten from last week. 1, and that is, this is a Kabbalistic idea, but it's stated by Shlomo Melech, who's clearly said, for every positive, there's an equal and opposite negative. Okay, then I think I'll just short circuit this because we get so much to get through. I may not go through all of them. He says, Ki kedusha achasi tachlis ha'achdus. The nature of kedusha, of holiness, is where you find unity. It's something we say in Shabbos afternoon in our prayers. Atah echad v'shim kol echad amika amcha Yisrael God ba'aretz. You Hashem are one. Your name is one. And who's like the Jewish people? One nation in the world. And what that means is that the innate nature of the Jewish people is oneness. Something from Shlomo Volba and Ali Shar puzzles over and is baffled by. How come, if that's our basic nature, we manage to split ourselves into all sorts of conflicting and fighting bits? But that's why we're in Golas in the first place. But the innate nature of Kedusha is where you find Achdus, and therefore the souls of Klal Yisrael come from Hashem. His nature is one, and our role is to be the focus and the inspiration of mankind. But far more than that, and this is another Kabbalistic idea he says here, that the creation of the world was not a one-off. Hashem didn't create it, and as it were, put it on a mantelpiece or put it on a shelf. There's the whole universe. Rather, it's an ongoing creation. It's a bit like the computer, which is working at the moment. It's fed by electricity. I mean, it can do all sorts of great things, but unless it's got electricity going into it, then it's just a blank screen. The world will go back and return to Tohu Vavohu, nothingness, if Hashem didn't continually allow that creative force to flow to the earth. And it flows through Klal Yisrael. And the place where it flows through Klal Yisrael best is, or I guess I don't think best is the right word, but ideally is in Yerushalayim. The earth is Israel and Yerushalayim. That's where heaven and earth kiss. The Kabbalistic books say that that's where Hashem created the world. He started from Yerushalayim. That's why they say it's the top of the world, it's the highest part of the world. No, it's not. Everest is. Everest much higher. Scottish mountains are higher. Swiss mountains are higher. Or what it means is that if Hashem started from that point, then automatically everything is lower. And therefore, when Hashem created there, that's the place where, as a heaven and earth touch or kiss, and that's what Klal Yisrael is. So that kedusha comes directly from heaven to us, and through us out to the world. We're meant to be an inspiration and somebody who would inspire and touch the lives of all the nations of the world. The story the Alshich starts off with is he quotes, interestingly, that at the time when it says, in fact, I'll share the screen now so you can see this. But if you, Chaim, I've got the thing that you'll see it very clearly. So I'll share the screen for people who'll be watching this later. And share, and try and remember to switch it off after I finish sharing. Right, here is the story here. So let's just remind ourselves a little bit what's going on. Ooh, that's big. Okay. By he called Oris Sofa Echos, and the whole world was one language. But the language, of course, they spoke was the Lashon HaKodesh of Hebrew. By he Benosim Mikedem, and it was when they journeyed from the east, by Yimso Beka Be'eretz Shinar, and they find a valley in the land of Shinar, and they dwell there, they live there. Oh, Yomer Ishal Ra'ia, and each one said to their neighbor, Hovan Nilbad Levinim, let's bake bricks, and we'll put them in a kiln and bake them by the Ilal. Well, Evan will use them stones, the Chamira Hoyulahem, and we'll use mortar. So men to Yomer Hovan even Alona ear. So let's make a city. Umigdal with the tower, the Rosh Hashanah with his head going into heaven. Manas Alona Shem will make for ourselves a name. Pain nofuts altania oryx colors, unless we're scattered, lest we were scattered all over the world. Now the Alshich said last week, when it says, if you, the first verse again, by he called oryx sofa echos, udevorim achodim, they all had one language. Udevorim achodim. Devorim achodim, how do they translate this? Oh, one common purpose. But the Medrash says they were talking about devorim are things, or words of achodim. They were talking about one things, two ones. What are the two ones? And the Avram Avinu was a one, he couldn't have any children. Using their abilities to look into the future, they saw exactly what Hashem's plan was. That the nature of Klal Yisrael is one. That's why it says when the Jewish people go down to Eretz Yisrael, it famously says they're Shivim Nofesh, 70 soul. Well, it should be 70 souls. Anybody can do the simple Hebrew and say that. But it's telling you the basic nature is they're all one, as we said before. That they knew that Hashem wanted to bring a Klal Yisrael into the world, whose nature would be one, to draw down that Kedusha, that sustaining force, that Shekhinah, to the world to keep the world going. And the other thing that we're talking about was the other one that they were talking about, the Devarim Achodim, was that Avram Avinu couldn't have any children. That's more or less what we got up to. Another couple of Jewish principles, general Jewish principles, that the non-Jewish world are structured differently. Non-Jewish nations are structured differently. They are allowed to be more independent and more unique from each other, different to each other, which is not the nature of Klal Yisrael. We are ultimately one. They're diverse. They're different and have unique personalities and unique roles to play. 70 unique roles to play, and all those special gifts which designate and define them as being different and unique. You can find them in the Jewish people as well. Historically, you can see that quite clearly from the fact that the Jewish people have lived in all these nations and often become better at their stuff than they are themselves. German Jews made the best Germans. American Jews are, Yankee Doodles and all that sort of stuff. So basically, this is the idea. Now, he quoted a Medrash, the Alshich, before we get to this week's Alshich, and this is, it was in Bereshis Kaf Gimel, and it was apparently there was a fight, obviously a Midrashic fight, in other words, it's just a mashal, between the chaff and the straw over which was the best, which was the greatest. Who justified the planting of the crop? So the straw says me, and the chaff says me, and the wheat says you wait till it comes to when it comes to the harvest, and you'll see who's the main point. And of course, the harvest comes, and the wheat's cut down, the straw is dispensed with, and then they winnow it, and the chaff's blown away by the wind, and you're left with the main thing. That's very, very interesting. This Medrash says that there is three protagonists in this argument. There's the wheat, the chaff, and the straw. And here he says that indeed, that's exactly the argument between the non-Jewish world and the Jewish world as to who and what is the Iker. So it's an incredibly interesting, at the end of the Torah, towards the end of the Torah, in Parshas Netzavim, in Lamed Posuk Zion, I think I put that, maybe I didn't, so let me put that down. Did I put this up here? No, I didn't. Okay, Lamed Zion, because it's not the Alshich. And the Lamazai says, it's talking about all the things that will happen to the Jewish people if we fail, stop sharing for the moment, if we fail to keep the Torah the way that we should keep the Torah. And then it famously says, and this is, again, Torah and Lamed and Pasuk Zayin, but Nosan Hashem Elokecha. So Hashem says all the terrible things that will happen to us if we fail to keep the Torah. And then he says, but when you do tshuva, but Nosan Hashem Elokecha, Iskala Ola Sa'ila, Hashem will put all of these curses, Al Oivecha, Ba'al Sainecha, Asher Udefucha, on your enemies and your haters, who chase after you, who pursue you, try to destroy you. Interesting, huh? Interesting that it says Oivecha B'Sainecha, two categories. And again, we're back to the three. There was the chaff and the straw and Klal the straw. And here in the Torah it says that I'll put all these, of course the Gemara and the Avodah Zarah talks about this when the Mashiach comes, then the non-Jewish world will have to give a din b'cheshbon, will be brought to book for their behavior towards Klal Yisrael. And here he says that there will be two categories, Sainecha v'Oivecha. The Ramban doesn't say anything, doesn't address that clearly or fully here in his commentary on the Chumash. But he did when he was in the court of King James I of Aragon. Famously, and this was a recurring theme through the Middle Ages, that a king or a duke or a ruler would demand that the local rabbi would debate with the church as to whose religion was right. The normal tip-off was given beforehand from the church to the rabbi to the impertinence to win the debate. They would lay out a nice pogrom. So it was not just fighting with one hand tied behind your back; it was your feet, your trust, your feet and your arms. In the case of the King James I of Aragon, capital, it was Barcelona. It became incorporated into the Spanish state later, 1492. But when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But at that time, as an independent country, King James ordered the Ramban to debate. He refused. Those days, refusing a king's command is a very dangerous thing. King summoned the Ramban to explain his behavior, and he said, "There's no point because if I win, then there'll be a pogrom." And the king gave his personal assurance that that would not occur. And he was able to keep his word, even though the Ramban won the debate, and the king rewarded him with bags of gold coins. He was able to protect the Jewish community from a pogrom. He wasn't able to protect the Ramban, and that's why the Ramban fled to Israel. And there, at the end of the debate, and he famously says, "Ooh, don't tell me I lost the place." Yes, at the end of the debate, he says, "That posuk aloivecha ba'alseinecha sherudefucha u'parashti lehem." Now the Ramban talking, and I explained to the court, "Ki oivecha and stream." These two categories, the people who hate you are the ninth stream, the Christians. The seinecha, the people that hate you, your enemies are the Christians. The seinecha, people who hate you, the world of Islam. These are the people who chase after us. They had no answer, but and that was the end of that story there. Intriguing. Sharing the screen for a second. I want to show you something which is I think you'll find interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting that he said that Seinecha is small.
Yes.
And we say
your haters. Oh, that's true. Well, I suppose if somebody is your enemy, they hate you as well. But the two categories, that's a very good point. Look at this. I think you'll find this interesting. This is a cathedral, which you may be familiar with. It took 200 years to build this place. And that is, do you recognize that? Okay. Never lived in Paris? Never been to Paris? Okay. I used to live there, so I recognize it well. They call it, the Christians call it Notre Dame, which means, we would call it Le Dame, if you speak French, their lady. And they call it Our Lady. And so it's Our Lady of Paris is the name of the cathedral. And this is all the kings of France who are up there. And then there's two figures here. I don't know if I can zoom in on that. Can I zoom in? Yes, I can. There you go. And you can just see, it's not very clear here, that they are two women. But just because it's not very clear here, I downloaded before the actual two statues.
Are you talking about the ones in between the arches?
And the either side of the arches. I'll show you that again. Let's show you and bring it up again. There's three. So there's three. This is the main entrance to the cathedral, and that's the main entrance. Okay. And these are meant to be I think I remember it to be the Chassidim of Yoshki.
The Gospels.
Sorry?
The Gospels.
No, not the Gospels, the Apostles, if you're looking for the word. It means the Chassidim, his disciples. And here are the two figures here. So the main entrance, you got one figure on your left and one figure on your right. And here they are here. Can you see them? Can you see it, Abby?
Yep. Yeah, clearly.
That's the one there. And this is a theme you'll find in many cathedrals throughout Europe. It's called Eglise is the French word and the Latin word for church. This is the church and synagogue, and that's the synagogue. In other words, here is a young woman. She's got a staff which is whole. She's holding some sort of like Kiddush cup there, and she's looking quite happy, really. Here is the broken staff and the blinded. I think she's got a mask around her eyes, and that's the synagogue. So the church saw itself, and I think we mentioned this last week when I used to live in Paris. There's two cathedrals in Paris. One is called this one here, Notre Dame, and the other one's called Sacré-Cœur, which has got beautiful white domes, and it lives in another Jew. This is quite near the Jewish area. The other one is right in another two Jewish areas of Paris, traditional Jewish areas. And Sacré-Cœur is a cathedral. The cathedra is the Latin word for a throne, and the bishop sits on his throne. And the cathedra, I didn't make this picture, but the back of the throne has got a big Star of David in it. It is a big Star of David. And the idea was the church saw itself as the new Israel. We're the new Israel. So one of the great symbols of the church is that cathedral in Paris. And here,
that the one that had a fire?
Yeah, there it is.
Oh.
And there is. I don't think it works there. Good. This is the same cathedral. Was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago? I can't remember. And even though the French hushed it up, there was a Muslim that set fire to it. Just like last week or 2 weeks ago, a Muslim newly arrived from Tunisia went into a church. And
something tells me, Rabbi, Y.Y. Rubenstein is going to say Crimea River.
Killed 2 people and beheaded somebody shouting Allah in the church. But there are many, many churches that have been burned in France. And the French state is under massive attack from its own Muslim population. This doesn't click, but if you watch that, I mean, that was quite astonishing to me to see this. Of course, they were trying to rebuild it. But here it's very interesting. So, and why did there's a Muslim, they found a car full of all sorts of Islamic ISIS type stuff, all pointing at somebody and set fire to the roof. He did a good job of it. So the whole thing came tumbling, or most of it came tumbling down. But here are the two enemies of the Jewish people: the church. Of course, they hate each other as well. Certainly, the extremist Muslims certainly hate the church here, and that's what it's saying. So each one claims to be the new Israel. The Christians claim that they are the new Israel, and Islam claims to have superseded and taken over, etc., etc. And our statement is, okay, fine, as we think that's okay. And now we'll just wait for the Mashiach, and then we'll have it all sorted out. So that's I can stop sharing that. I think I can stop sharing. And that's the story so far. And that's where we were up to. Now, in order to go a little bit further, let me just link it once back to last week. We said, or just in our introduction here, Zulu and Mazuba are looking for every positive as an equal and opposite negative. Well, that means if there is a place which connects heaven and earth, then how could it possibly be that force could come anywhere else? That sustaining force, that electricity, Abby, you'll like that metaphor I'm using here. Electricity that comes to the planet to keep it going, comes straight down to Yerushalayim. Their plan, seeing that there's going to be a man who will challenge them, seeing that Hashem's plan is to replace them with a cloud of straw. They, an early version of Christianity and Islam, if you like, said, we are going to stop that happening. We'll be the Jewish people. We will make sure there is no need for a Jewish people. And how could they possibly think to do that? And the answer is that they're going to make an anti-Yerushalayim. So we're talking about the church so much. There's an idea called the AntiChrist. The forces of darkness and all that sort of stuff. They want to make an anti-Yerushalayim. So what is Yerushalayim? There's a hill. And on the hill there is a city with a walled city with a tower. They're going to go to the west, where they have located the place which is the antithesis, the opposite of Yerushalayim. It's a valley instead of a mountain. I mean, a valley is the opposite of a mountain. And they're going to build a city with a wall and a tower. And at the top of the tower, what they're going to put? An avodah zarah, an idol. And that is going to allow them to challenge and subvert Hashem's plan for the world, for the be a cloudless throne. How would they do that? Well, again, as we said last week, there's a possibility of it coming in a straight line, that force that keeps the world alive, and almost like a big tube coming down from Shemayim to Yerushalayim and out there. But it can go to them and into us when we only get the crumbs left over from the table, like now when we're in Golis. So Hashem created the world where the best way, the ideal way, is to come down to us and out to the world, that force, that sustaining force. Or it can go to them and then through to us. And then it's much weaker. So when we're in Golis, and you, of course, there would be a time when in Golis, there's a, as it were, a plan B. You can flip a switch. There's a backup generator. So we keep it going. Abby, how do you like the backup generator module? Is that any good?
Which backup generator?
That's what he's got. If the sustaining power that keeps the world alive, instead of going directly to us, goes to the non-Jewish nations, then they knew that there was a backup generator in case, as it were, the main grid would go down.
You're referring to an automatic transfer switch.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Right, an automatic transfer switch, and where it would go to them. They knew that such a thing existed, and that means to say that it might not be exactly the same, might not be the same power and voltage and wattage and all that sort of stuff, but you've got enough to keep you going, because they know that if Hashem is not able to send that, then the world's finished. They have to be able to get it coming directly to them and not to us, to get rid of the idea of a cloudless throne. And how are they going to do that? And that's why the Pasuk says, famously, the Rashofa Echos, there were one people with one plan. We're talking about Devarim Echad, they were united. So let me read to you a little bit of the Alshich. And at that point, we will share our screen again. Share screen. Well, I'm not sharing the screen already. That would have been no good. Okay, which one was it? Yeah, that one. Good. So, come on, work. I was giving an hour share last night, and the computer has refused point blank to work. Why aren't you working? Thank you. Then actually, you watch what you're doing. I'm very angry with you. And can you see that, Abby?
Chassam Sofer?
And no, it's not the Chassam Sofer. It's Taras Moshe is in Moshe Alshich.
All right. The previous author.
Yeah, I'm sure there must be more actually. I'm trying to make that big so that Heinz, who's sitting here, can see it as well. Can you see that from me? Shall I get your telescope? You want to come a bit nearer? Come and join in. Bring a chair. We didn't quite like me. Okay. Right. Okay.
Who came?
And in order that they would be able to join in this uniting process, that the world will be united. Incidentally, that's my thumb, in case you want to. Just you might like to see that. Look at that. That's a real thumb. In order that the world would be united in this process, it says that so in order they would do the building of this new city with passion. Also, the Yoma Ish away. The Moses said each man said to his neighbor, "What's Ish?" So he says, "Shekol Ish Mikra is Choshev, anybody." And it says Ish, that means a very, very special person. These were the kings of all these different nations, Mitzrayim, Cush, and Put, of Canaan, etc. And they said, "We will lead the charge in the same way that Paro led the charge and prepared his own chariot to lead the army against the Jewish people to inspire them." Then they did the same thing. In Lord Naska, if we don't do it with our own hands, law is Daras Hamon La'asas. The rest of the people won't do it, so we got to inspire them. Ke'etzes Abimelech ben Yeruba, as Abimelech said, Ish Choshev. It says Ish something. He's fellow Choshev person. Missed that bit out. Go on. Now we said before that the Shar Shemaim, the plug, is that directly connects the world to heaven is Yerushalayim and Zion. Hashem wanted to give us praise, honor the Jewish people. From there out would come the condition for the rest of the world. As is known to Yudei, as is known to people who know Chen. Chen means
Liebschaft.
Oh, Liebschaft. Oh, yeah, we are going to their job tonight. Yavor Liebschaft. Yes, but Chen is a let's forget this word. Acronym. For Chochmas Nister. In other words, the Kabbalists know the Kabbalah Shofar Kedusha. That is the place where it would draw down the condition of the Torah. Okay. Not sure so then they said, let us build our own alternative city with its alternative Torah, a negative Yerushalayim. Ir keneged Yerushalayim. Migdal keneged Zion, which is Migdal David. Ki Migdal David, who's Zion. And we'll draw that down there. The Shematam and me will say, jumping a bit, how could it possibly be that they would draw that force down there? We'll make sure the Torah goes up to heaven. The idea would it would go up. I don't know if I mentioned this last week. Were you here last week? Can you remember this? Did I tell you about when I was in Soweto in South Africa? I don't know if he's there. Anyway, so basically, Johannesburg is from the apartheid era. Outside Johannesburg, there is a township, a ghetto, big black ghetto, sprawling. The heart of that ghetto, Soweto, is a place called Kliptown. That's where it grew from. The poverty there is breathtaking. When I was there lecturing a couple of years ago, my wife and I went on a tour of Soweto. I mean, real third world poverty. How does the township, to get its electricity, there's a train line that runs through it. And they simply throw wires on top of the electric wires that power the trains. You know, these trains like that. Incredible. In other words, you can hack into the grid. That's what they meant to do. They would have a tower that should go to Shemaim. They would have an Avodah Zorah, as Chazal say at the top of it. What was the Avodah Zorah? The Sultan. The Sultan. The Sultan was the Malach who would unite them. Instead of having their own gods, because in the ancient world, everybody had their own gods. Think of Rome, and it was Jupiter as their king, chief god. And then the Greeks had, was it Zeus? And then the Vikings and the Norse had Odin, they all their chief gods, etc., etc. No, everybody would be united with one religion. What's the motto of the United States of America? E pluribus unum. That's right. E pluribus unum. Unum is Latin. From pluribus, from plural, from many, unum, one. We will now turn people whose innate nature is to be disparate, to be separate, to be different. We will unite them. We'll make it into an America, right? And of course, the whole idea of America, I'm not getting into modern politics or anything like that, but of course, it was a European project primarily, was to, as it were, and that's why so many American politicians were against getting involved in the First World War and the Second World War. Europe, they were, because they had different languages and didn't unite, it was not e pluribus unum, then let them do their own stuff. How can, that's nothing to do with us, which it was profoundly naive, of course it was. But anyway, but the idea is to make, as it were, a United States of America, a negative United States of America. Anyway, Baruch the Kulam Hoya Samuel, and the head for all of them would be Samuel, that's the angel of Samuel, and that would draw down the hashpah to this world.
What is it that attracted to them?
Sorry?
What is it that attracted them to Samuel?
Oh, why would you choose that particular angel?
No, I mean there's Zeus, like you mentioned, and other.
Oh, well, they don't really exist. Remember, they know about Hashem. They're talking about people who are effectively frum and evil simultaneously. They know about Hashem. They know what He wants to do. They just want to make sure it doesn't actually happen. Samuel, as we all know, is the Yitzhahara, and then he's the voice inside your head. When he's the voice inside your head, he gets you to do stuff you shouldn't do, or not do stuff you should do. Then he goes and informs on you in Shemaim, and then if possible, he can get you killed. So in other words, he's the guy that makes you to do bad stuff. But that's exactly the point. They want to do bad stuff. So what they be united with.
That was their avoda. Their avoda was to give in to
that's
the
right. That's right. So they'll have, like Roman orgies, and Rome is a pretty good example of this, by the way. I mean, what sort of people take their children to watch people being, have their limbs cut off in the arena, in the great what's it called, Colosseum in Rome, etc., etc.
They were sadistic.
So when it comes, sorry.
They were sadistic.
Yeah, but everything the Sultan offers you, then that's what they wanted. And the same way is this place that they built, which is going to be called Bavel, is going to be an anti-Yerushalayim. Then the message of Yerushalayim, Zula Umasubor Lakim, is the message they're going to be sold. So the thing that will unite them together, incidentally, Jonathan Sacks passed away last week. Knew him for a very, very long time. There's a famous writer called Melanie Phillips. She writes for the Times of London, and she's syndicated in the United States of America, and she, like him, is a super brain, Lahavdil. And I'm very much in touch with her, very respect her enormously. And I went to, when I was in Jerusalem last year, we spent 3 hours schmoozing with her, a Yechidus with Melanie Phillips. And she was saying that Jonathan Sacks, when she started to become frum, and she also became close to Jonathan Sacks, that he'd explained to her with his super, I mean, academically, in secular studies, it was enormous, that basically the liberalism of Europe, or liberalism of America, the left's agenda, is totally anti-Torah. It's anti-Torah. That's not, obviously not in the same mystical sense as this was. This is, quite clear what it was all about. Anyway, so basically, they would be joined by unity. And what was the motto of Nazi Germany? Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. Right? One. And that oneness becomes a profound danger to Klal Yisrael. If the nations of the world can replace us by them being unified, then we're in severe trouble. And that's, remember what Rashi says. Rashi says in Posuk Tes in this story, when HaShem comes down and he says, I have to scatter them. And Rashi says the following thing: Mishom Hafitzim, from Bavel, he split them up. One opinion says, Gemara Sanhedrin, they didn't get any Olam Haba. This is again Yud Aleph Tes. Sorry, the key Ezel Kasha, is that Shaldora Mabel or Shaldora Ploga? And then Rashi asks the question, whose behavior was worse? The generation of Noach, which was got the flood and completely eradicated and wiped out, or Dor Havlaga? One, all they were into was the sexual corruption and the violence and all that sort of stuff, but they didn't try and take on God. Whereas these people want to actually take on God, fight against God. To fight against God. And that was quite literal. They thought, we can get him. He set up it's the exact same thing as Paro. When Paro decided to drown all the Jewish boys at birth, why didn't they strangle them? Because Paro says, let's be clever against these people. They knew exactly what Hashem's all about. And they knew that he always works, as Rashi says, they're Mida Keneged Mida. And if we drown them, then he would have to punish us because he works Mida Keneged Mida by drowning us. But he made an oath he would never bring another flood to the world. So therefore we've checkmated them. That's how we kill the babies, and he can't touch us. Of course, they failed to realize that he would not bring another flood to the world, but he'd bring you to a flood. And they actually entered into the sea. Well, he just asking for trouble. But same here. They know that Hashem has created the world where, as it were, the main grid is the power that comes directly to Yerushalayim. But there's a plan B. There's a backup generator, or as Avi told me, something I wish I've completely forgotten already. Secondary circuit breaker or thingy.
Automatic transfer switch.
Exactly. That's what I said. Yeah. And they knew that existed. So therefore, if we can fix it, that becomes the default position. We don't need the Klal Yisrael. Got this? Now, but Rashi says here, so what was worse? But these people, even though they wanted to fight against God, hold on, these were not, these evil people who were trying to do this were not wiped out, but the Mabel was. And as Bidora Mabel Gazlani, but in the door of the flood, then they were Gazlani. That means to say physical violence against each other. And because there was conflict between them, that's why they get wiped out. But these people had Hava Barias, they had friendship and Achdus, like the German people had Ein Volk, Ein Reich, Ein Führer. But they were united. And it says that they had one language. They were united. Devarim Achadim in this project that we're just describing now. That's to see how much Hashem hates Machlokas and how much he values Shalom. And the Alshich says the exact same thing. He says that the fact that they had that unity, that even though they deserved to die, but Hashem said no, that unity gives them a certain degree of kedusha, and that protected them. So all that happened was that it was scattered, completely running out of time. And let me take you to the next page of Alshich. So if I close that one, if I do that right, there's a very interesting Alshich. And for that, to look at the Alshich, we'll better go back to our verse again. Look at this. So what happens is Hashem says, this is what they've tried to do. If I don't stop them now, they'll win. Right? So, and incidentally, when Hashem came down from Shema, V'yam Hashem, Hein Am Echod, the Sofa Echos, and then, they all get the same language, that's what they started to do. Nothing will be refused from them. What you tried to do. Now, what we'll do is we'll come and we will mix up their languages. So they won't, so they don't understand each other's languages. This is tremendously interesting. Why did Hashem come down then? Because Abraham Avinu, who was 48 years of age, he saw what was going on and he asked Hashem to come down. So they really, in perceiving Avram as the ultimate threat, they were right. But look what happens here. The Yafos Hashem Oisam Misham Al Piepnei Kolaris, Hashem scattered them throughout the lands. The after lived in Israel, and they stopped building the city. Alkin Korah Shmo Bavel. That's why the place was called Bavel. Kisham Blal Hashem Sfas Kolaris, because there Hashem Blal mixed up the languages of all the nations on the earth. Avi and Chaim, what's wrong with that? Again, Alshich glasses on, gentlemen. Al came Korah Shemal Bavel. They called the place Bavel. Why? Kisham Bilal Hashem Svas Kol Oretz. Because Hashem Bilal mixed up.
It should be called Bilal and not Bavel.
It's called Bilal. Duh. So why do you call it Bavel? That's bizarre. Agreed?
Yeah.
I had a question about Chava.
The 300 people watching this here tonight. Okay. Good.
Chava and Chaya. It says Adam called her Chava ki haisa ein kol Chai. So call her Chaya. Why Chava?
Go on. So.
No, I'm saying you find similar corruption.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah, similar. Yeah. So I'll tell you what he says here. This is very interesting. So the Alshich is the question that says the Alshich is not me. Oops, that's the wrong one. Did I do the wrong one twice? That's that one second. That's the one. There we go. I'm very excited now seeing how all this high-tech stuff works. Okay, so he says, Roy Lawson Liv, we should consider Lama Nikra Baba. Why is it called Baba? Bala Balal. What? Just as Avi asked. Avi, you're doing extremely well today. After Yoisa Nikra Balal, and if it was called Balal, that would be a problem. Why? Because why was it called Bavel? According to the verse, Akin Kroshma Bavel, it's called Bavel. Why? Yisham Balal Hashem is fast coloris. Because Hashem, two things. Hashem mixed up their languages. Hashem hafetzim, and they're also scattered throughout the world. So two things happened as a consequence of what they did wrong, or what Hashem did two things because of what they did wrong. So if they called it Bavel, Balal, what would that talk about? What would that suggest?
Only one thing.
Only one thing. Give it all. That's quite cute, isn't it? It's very sort of seasonal. Okay, then that would only the one thing, or the one thing would be about the fact that he mixed up their languages, but it wouldn't talk about the fact that it was scattered, right? So he says the following very interesting thing. So he said, and if it would be called Balal, enough of us wouldn't talk about the scattering. And of course, we know that the place was called for two things: the scattering and the mixing of the languages. Achiomar Tina, you should know. Lama Nukas Bavel, why was it called Bavel Balal? Alki lo hoya moira rak alki shem balal Hashem. As we said, that will only tell you one thing. Ach lo alas ezos, but not the second. Omnam. Yesh tamaket, there's a different reason. And that was because it was scattered. Now, if you also have base, now if we change the base, instead of a shnia b'mokim lamed, if we now take a base and stick it where the lamed should be, so instead of balal, we'll now make it bavel. Now what have we done? We've replaced a lamed with a base. A lamed is 13, and the base is 2. So therefore, we've taken away 28. Agreed?
Yeah.
Good, we replaced it, I got 28. Nimsa choser esr mishmona. See, I got the arithmetic right. Then you have now, it's now lacking 28. She'oila mispar mechuborim. And that is in the mispar cotton, the word mechuborim, unified or joined or connected. They were now disconnected. So now that implies the scattering and the language. So both were there in order to guarantee that they could never unify themselves. To want to replace Klal Yisrael, then they were scattered, they were in different places, and also their language was different. There is nothing that destroys the possibility of human unity than when they see themselves as being different. HaShem guaranteed that they would see themselves as being different. And when the European project started, I'm not claiming to be a genius or anything, but when they started to build the European Union, of course, living in Europe at the time, I knew they would collapse. And of course, Britain led the way with Brexit. But I knew it would collapse because it's not in the nature of the non-Jewish world to want to unify. But the reason behind the whole European Union was because not unified means that, you know, Europe's history is just one bloody war after one bloody war after one bloody war. So they're onto something. However, when they're using it against Hashem Yisborach, so let's go back to the Medrash. So the chaff and the straw were arguing, and the wheat just stood back and said, well, you think you're the main guy, you think you're the main guy, wait and we'll see. But they hate us, and our haters and our enemies hate each other, but they're still our haters and our enemies. They're burning down each other's churches and killing people in the churches. There's a war, but ultimately the real danger to those who see themselves as the new Israel is the old Israel. Okay, see you next week, gentlemen. We're going to, I've got a very interesting share for you for next week. Same time, same channel. Have a very good week.